right. We're talking today with Martin Schuiling of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
In Grand Rapids,
In what year?
1926.
Okay. Now, did you grow up in Grand Rapids, or did you move around?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what was your family doing for a living when you were a kid?
My father was in the sheet metal business. My mother was a stay-at-home mother.
Okay. Now, did your father, did he own his business, or was he a worker, or what?
He owned it. He was in the First World War,
Mm-hmm.
and he was gassed in France, and they revived him, and he came home and went to a senior year at Union and was captain of the football team, and was never in the hospital again until he was 92.
Wow. Okay. So the gas thing didn't have a lot of lasting effects.
No.
Okay. Now, was he able to keep his business during the Depression?
It was his father's business.
Okay. But they were able to keep going?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. And then did you finish high school?
Yes.
Okay. And when did you graduate?
44.
Okay. To back up a little bit, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I was over at my grandma's house, and she pointed at me, and my dad and I were standing out on the porch, and she says, "He's going to be in it before this is over."
Mm-hmm.
And my dad says, "No." He says, "I'll go in his place." So I never forgot that.
All right. Now, but you're still kind of early in high school at that point, or you're not, or were you sophomore?
No, I don't think I was in high school when that
Yeah.
dropped the boil. That was 41.
Yeah. So you might have been that
I
point
was
coming
still-
out of middle
our,
school, or
Our middle school was a 10th grade.
okay, yeah, so you'd still be there.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as time went, did you just assume that sooner or later Uncle Sam would come calling?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, before before you joined the service, were you paying much attention to the news from the war?
Definitely.
Okay. Now, were you the oldest boy in your family, or
Yes.
okay? All right. So you didn't have a brother ahead of you, or something like that.
I have a younger brother and a younger sister.
Okay. Now, so when did you get your draft notice?
Oh gosh, early in 44.
Okay. So,
And I didn't have to go in June,
Mhm.
but I wanted to go with my friend. He was a little older than I. So they bumped me up, and we went to Great Lakes, and as we walked in the door, he had to go to the hospital. He had piles. Never saw him again till the war was over.
Oh well, but in the meantime, there you were.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what did the training at Great Lakes consist of?
Well, discipline, calisthenics, marching, fire prevention, fire drills, rifles, shooting rifles. That's about it.
Okay. How much emphasis was there on the drill and discipline stuff?
Everything was.
All right. And how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to that?
I didn't find it hard.
You just did what they told you?
I did what they told me.
Okay. Now, were there other guys training along with you who
Oh,
were having
yeah.
more trouble?
Yeah.
What sorts of problems would people have, or?
Homesickness.
Mhm.
We got a series of shots there, and a lot of them got sick from that. But nothing serious.
Okay. And how long did the basic training last?
3 months.
Okay. And during that time, did you get to go off the base at all, or were you
No.
just stuck there in Great Lakes? Okay. Now, when you were there, did you learn anything about what they were going to do with you, or what kind of job you get?
No.
No. Okay. So you're all just
I was just
Seaman.
in a bunch, you
Yeah.
know.
Okay. So what happens then at the end of those 12 weeks?
They told me I was going to go to gunnery school in Gulfport, Mississippi.
Okay.
So I went home for 7 days and then went to Gulfport
And how did they get you to Gulfport?
by train, troop train.
And what do you remember about that train ride?
Well, I remembered sitting in the where they prepared the food because I could get more to eat there. So I volunteered my services in there.
Okay. Do you have an idea of how long it took to get down there?
No, I don't. I
Okay.
don't recall.
All right. Because sometimes people talk about having to wait a lot or stop a lot and let other trains go by or that kind of thing.
Yeah, that happened. I can remember the ladies from Red Cross handing us sandwiches and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Now, when you get to Gulfport, now what happens?
Well, I was in another company, and they trained us on anti-aircraft, 20 millimeter, 40 millimeter, and a 1.1. I don't think they even use a 1.1 anymore. But that training lasted about 2 months.
And how would they train you to use those weapons?
By using them.
Well, but did you have targets to shoot at?
Oh, yeah.
And were these aerial targets or on the ground or on the water or?
They were not aerial. We didn't have any aerial.
Okay. So you,
Mostly ground.
okay, so like just on a firing range kind of thing then.
Correct.
Okay. So now presumably if you're going to be manning anti-aircraft guns, you'd be shooting at aircraft. But they weren't doing anything to prepare you for that?
Not there. We got that on board ship.
Okay. All right. Now, when you're at Gulfport, did you get to go off the base at all, or?
Yep.
Okay. And what could you do, or where could you go?
We hitchhiked to New Orleans,
Mhm.
and most of the guys got tattoos. And the last thing my mother said to me, please don't get a tattoo. And I didn't.
All right. Now you're down in the South, and this is still the segregated South. Did you notice any of that while you were there? Okay.
We noticed in Texas, the people were very kind to us. They'd give us tickets to the Shrine Circus, which was playing at that time. They were just nice people.
Okay.
I went to eat after church with the family. So,
Okay. But I guess in your story, we haven't gotten you to Texas yet. We've gotten you as far as Gulfport,
well,
Mississippi.
Texas is where I had leave.
Oh, okay.
So that was
Why did you go to Texas on leave?
closest.
Okay.
And we'd get a ride by hitchhiking.
Okay. So that was sort of in range. So would this be like along the coast in Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Area. All right.
New Orleans is right on the coast.
Right. Yeah. You Gulfport, New Orleans, and then further down you get into Texas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. When you think about the time when you're training in Gulfport, is there any particular impression or experience that stands out from that?
No,
Okay.
not that I recall.
All right. Now, are you still there? Is it summer then, or fall by the time you get there?
Yeah, because we were assigned to a ship and we shipped out of there Thanksgiving Day of '44.
Okay. So maybe it wasn't quite as hot as it might have been in July or something like that.
It was muggy. Everything tasted muggy. You know.
And there wouldn't be any air conditioning in the places where you were? No, no, not on that day. Okay. So basically, so you actually, now, what job are you training for? What do they expect to do with you after you finish your gunnery training?
A gunner's mate.
Okay.
On board the ships. So.
Okay. But was there an expectation you would go on merchant marine ships, or might it be anywhere?
Well, they called our outfit the Armed Guard,
Right.
and all armed guards went on merchant ships.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. And when you're training as for that, Uh, did they tell you anything about what kind of relationship you're supposed to have with the ship's crews, or how you're supposed to behave, or
No.
no? So this is just how to use the guns.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so now you get late in the year, you get assigned to your first ship. And so, what ship do you go on?
Then Miss Vistula
Okay.
on Thanksgiving Day.
All right. And how describe the Vistula? About how big was it, or how old was it?
It was really old. It had been sunk once, and they resurrected it, and I know it had fleas in it like crazy. And we had 110 octane gas. And from Galveston, we went down to the canal. Now, is that what you want me to recall? No?
Well, yeah, we're just kind of following you along the way. Now you say you had the 110 octane gas. Was that your fuel or your cargo?
Cargo.
Okay. Was that going to be aviation fuel? Or?
Aviation fuel.
All right. So basically, were you just a small tanker essentially?
It
An
was
oiler?
a large tanker.
Okay. Okay. And about how big do you think it was, or how long?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right, but tankers are big. Yeah.
It was my first ship, and I thought it was humongous.
And how many armed guards were on it?
23.
Okay. And how many guns did it have?
Seven.
Okay. The 20s, 40s.
2040s and a 3-inch 50.
Okay. All right. Now, had you ever spent any time on boats before this? Okay.
No.
So what's it like going to sea for the first time?
Well, it wasn't fun. I couldn't keep any food down.
Mm-hmm.
It was rather rough. But you get used to that.
Okay. But how long did it take for you to kind of get used to it?
By the time we got to Panama Canal,
Okay. And I guess, so would you have been up sort of on deck or on duty when you went through the canal? Okay, so you got to see the operation and
Yep.
all of that. But how long did it take to get through the canal?
less than a day.
Okay.
There's a freshwater lake in between the two
Mm-hmm.
canals, and we anchored overnight in the freshwater lake and then continued on the next day.
All right. And then once you got to the other side, then where did you go?
To Port Moresby, New Guinea.
All right. And did you travel in a convoy?
We started out with a convoy,
Okay.
but our ship's engines were not capable of both running at the same time. So the commandant decided to leave us behind.
Oh, good.
And yeah, not good. It was kind of a lonesome feeling when you're out there all by yourself, you know, with 110 octane gas.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you zigzagging back and forth as you went?
Yeah,
Okay. And how long did it take you to get to New Guinea?
62 days.
Did you stop anywhere?
No.
So you're 2 months getting across the ocean in this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were lucky to go 6 knots, you know.
All right. Now, along the way, did anything happen?
No,
No Japanese?
no,
Did you have any bad storms along the way?
not that I remember.
Okay. So it was just a long, slow trip.
Some guys went a little crazy,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't take it.
And could you do anything about them? Just,
Not me.
No, or the
I
ship-
wasn't the corpsman.
Yeah. Right. Well, okay. Now you're on merchant marine ship. So what kind of people were on it as crew?
I would say experienced sailors.
Okay. Was the people having trouble were the other armed guards? Okay.
Not that I know of.
Okay. All right. Now, were the sailors Americans or were they foreigners or?
Americans.
Okay. And do you remember anything about the captain of that ship?
Yeah, I can picture him yet. He's older man, probably not as old as I am right now, but gray-haired, standing on the bridge.
I mean, did he seem to know his job?
I think so.
Okay. All right. So how did you say 62 days at sea? How do you spend your time?
Painting, chipping rust. Our gun tubs, we had to maintain them, and we had a officer that was in charge of the armed guard,
Mm-hmm.
and he would always find something to do. Especially on rough days, we'd break out the paint. And paint and rough days don't mix.
Was he doing that just to keep you from getting seasick, or?
No, I don't know what his train of thought was. I think it was just to get our minds off what we were doing,
Mm-hmm.
where we were.
All right. Now, did they have any kind of ceremony on the ship when you crossed the equator or the dateline?
Yeah.
What did they do?
Well, the signalman was quite an artist, and he drew a mermaid, and of course we went through a bunch of stuff that they planned for us to break our, what was it, our will? I don't know. It was nothing that I could write home about.
Mm-hmm. So sort of a version. It's sort of like a King Neptune ceremony. Did they? That would, yeah. So it's a version of hazing.
Yeah.
I guess is the way. So the experienced guys get to
Right.
run it, and then you become a shellback rather than a polywog or
That's right.
something like that. Yeah.
You've been there.
Well, I have heard the story many
Oh.
times. Don't want to do it myself. But okay, so that's at least some diversion along the way as you get there. Now, when you get to Port Moresby, then what happens?
Well, they took our gas, and then they decided that the ship was so old that they would just make it a depot for
Mhm.
other ships that would come over and
Okay.
deposit their load in there. And we were sent down to Brisbane, Australia,
Okay. And how did you get to Brisbane?
on a ship.
Another
I
ship,
don't
okay.
remember what
All
it
right.
was.
And did you get to go ashore in Brisbane for a while?
Oh yeah,
And I don't know how much of a town was there in those days.
quite a bit. There was streetcars, horses you could rent, keep up with the streetcars.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and then skating rink. For us at 19, you know.
Right. Did you? I don't know. I guess what impression did you have of Port Moresby? I mean, was there anything there?
No, it was very primitive.
A sort of military
First
facilities?
experience with the natives.
Okay. What was that like?
Well, they were not civilized. Very little clothing. I don't recall them getting in any trouble with us.
Mhm.
You know.
Or were they just kind of hanging around, or were they using any of them as laborers, or
Any what?
any of the natives as laborers? Because loading and
No,
unloading.
ours wasn't labor intense because they did it with pumps. you
Right.
know.
Right. So there were just some locals there watching you, or
Right.
whatever. Okay. Because then the army would use them to help carry things overland
Oh,
and that
yeah.
kind of thing, and fighting. But, okay. And what were the Australians like?
They like everything with what is that green stuff?
Let's see.
I was just talking to my friend.
Marmite, Vegemite.
I can't think of
So
it
just
now.
kind of a nasty paste stuff. Yeah.
Everything was mutton,
Mm-hmm.
and everything had. What is that stuff? I just was talking about it with someone else. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
it was all right.
How do the people treat you?
Um, they were making about 5 times more than we were,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of held that over our heads, you know.
Oh, I mean, the Australians were making more than you? Okay.
The crew.
Oh, the crew were, okay, yeah. I was asking you how the Australians were treating you.
Well, they were the crew, Australians.
Oh, on the ship you were on?
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
curry.
Oh, curry, sure, okay.
Everything had curry on it. It's terrible.
All right. Now, at this point, do you get assigned to a new ship?
Yeah, we were in Brisbane maybe a couple weeks, and we got assigned to the city of Philadelphia,
Okay.
which is a reefer.
What does that mean?
Carried frozen food.
Okay, so
up to-
refrigerated ship, yeah.
Yeah,
All right. And now, and how many armed guards were on that?
and that was much smaller. I think there were about 11
Okay.
of us,
And-
including our officer.
Oh, you had to keep the same lieutenant?
Yeah,
Oh, well.
he got to choose who he could take with him.
Okay.
I was happy to go with him.
All right. And now, once you're on this ship, where do you sail to?
Up to the islands. The first one was French Haven,
Okay. That's on the north shore of New Guinea.
Right.
Yeah.
and then we went to Biak.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of that?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, it was the air base there.
Yeah.
Yeah. 13th Air Force.
That was my first air raid
Okay.
in Biak.
And what do you remember about that?
Well, the Japanese would put these planes together, and we called them wash machine Charlottes because that's what they sounded like. They weren't very fast,
Mhm.
but they'd come over and drop maybe a half a dozen bombs, just enough to make a nuisance, you know. And I can remember going up on the bridge. That was my station to my gun, and I got to thinking, I wonder if I did everything right about putting my gun back together, and I pretty near pulled the trigger. Had I, every sixth round was a
Tracer? Tracer?
no, it was one that lit up. Tracer.
Yeah, that's a tracer.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Well, you're from Chicago. And then, luckily I didn't pull it. Otherwise I would have started my own war.
Okay.
But I can remember going ashore there because the Army people had theaters. And during the theater one night, there was an air raid, and everything is turned off. It's completely black. And our orders were to return to our ship. Well, we ended up in the garbage pit. We never saw it, you know. We went over the edge, and there we spent about 2 hours. That was my first experience.
Okay. So it was deep enough you couldn't get back out of it?
Couldn't get back on. We had to have help.
Okay. All right. So was there a policy of just not shooting at the washing machine Charlie? Was there
Pardon me?
was there a policy against shooting at the?
Oh no, no. They were a nuisance.
Mhm.
They would hit our planes. And we'd go out in the morning, and the planes that were not flyable anymore, we'd cut the aluminum off and make bracelets. And I always found something to do.
Okay. So you go to Finchhafen, you go to Viac. Where would you pick up supplies from?
Australia,
Okay.
Brisbane,
You get it from Brisbane. Okay.
Townsville, Sydney, Melbourne.
Mhm. And when you went to those places, would you normally get to go ashore?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you're doing this. So then, aside from Finschhafen and Biak, where else do you sail to? Or was that all for that ship?
No, we went up to the China Sea. We went to the Admiralty Islands. I remember going there. And I don't remember the other islands we went to. But we would bring supplies up. Never ran into anything that we could shoot at, you know.
Okay. Now, would that refrigerated ship normally sail by itself or with escorts?
It was by ourselves, you know.
Okay. And did you worry about Japanese submarines or things like that?
No, not really.
Okay.
We were 18, you know.
All right. Now, how long did you stay with the city of Philadelphia? Was that
For near a year.
Okay. So were you on that ship when the war ended?
No.
Okay.
I was based in Luzon when they dropped the bomb,
Okay.
Philippines.
And what were you doing in Luzon?
Waiting for a ship to take me home. I had enough points to have a 30-day leave.
Okay. Okay. So, and so that was, but you've been, that was right after being in the city of Philadelphia?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So that ship, now had you sailed with that ship up to the Philippines?
Yeah.
Okay. So you had gotten that far?
Yeah. In fact, we ran aground and we were in the middle of the bay and it was like the 4th of July. I never seen so many tracers and shots. Thank goodness they weren't all shooting at us, but they weren't happy with where we were.
So they're not, okay, so roughly when was that then? Was that?
What time of year?
Yeah, where was it, I mean, it was a,
During the summer.
okay, but who was shooting, were the Japanese shooting at you?
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't know which bay you were in at the time then?
Port Princessa.
Okay.
Port Princessa.
Princessa, yeah, okay. I guess the Japanese were still fighting on the Philippines
Oh,
right
yeah.
until the end of the war,
Yeah.
and we were landing people in different places. But how long do you think you were aground?
There?
Yeah.
Oh, about 2 months, maybe.
Well, yeah, I thought you said you ran aground.
Yeah.
Okay, so how long were you stuck?
Oh, well, we got off in there. They come out and we unloaded the ship and
Yeah,
become
float
buoyant.
Okay, all right. Then when you went to the Philippines, did you see much of the civilians there?
Oh, yeah.
What impression did you have of them?
Oh. They didn't have anything. The people were less than dirt poor. They would make their own whatever it was and put it in Coke bottles. And some of the guys would drink it. And I can see them yet going out to the bay, waiting for their ship and laying there with their eyes open and flies in them, you know, dead to the world.
Mm-hmm. So Filipino moonshine, of some kind. Yeah. Okay. And did you get into Manila or?
Yep.
Okay. And what did you see there?
A Catholic church that we went to. There was no roof on it. It had been blown off. But they had a service on Sunday and we were allowed to go there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now, can you remember any other places that you visited when you were with the city of Philadelphia? You got to the Philippines, Biak, Finschhafen, Admiralty Islands.
We went to them places quite a few times.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And then you get to the end of the war. You're waiting, so you have a leave home. Okay. And then you had to come back to the Navy after the leave home?
Yeah, I had 30 days,
Mm-hmm.
and then I could report to my nearest naval base,
Okay.
which was Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
the day before Christmas. And my then girlfriend and my folks took me down, and I reported in at noon. 2 o'clock, I was on a troop train going to Bremerton, Washington,
Okay.
and I caught another ship, Damon M. Cummings, and overseas we went again.
All right. Uh, Now, were you on that ship just to take you to your next assignment, or was
No,
that
I
your?
served on that ship.
Okay, because you hadn't mentioned that one. That was the David
Damon Ed
Damon.
Cummings, 643.
And that's a.
Destroyer escort.
Okay.
DE.
Yeah. Okay. So the D. Okay, that's the Damon Head. Yeah. Okay. Was it called the Damon Ed Cummings, or was that just the abbreviation you're
That
getting
was
for
the
D?
name.
Okay.
That was a guy's name, I guess.
Okay. So you're on a destroyer escort. Okay. And where do you go on that ship?
Well, we left Bremerton, Washington, and went down to San Diego. Well, first of all, we went through the Puget Sound to demagnetize our ship,
Okay.
and then we went down to San Diego,
Mm-hmm.
and then to Hawaii. Never got off the ship, either place,
Mm-hmm.
and then over to Hong Kong, China.
Okay. And what was your impression of Hong Kong when you got there?
Wall-to-wall people. We had quite an experience there. We were moored in the Yangtze River. Ever hear of the Yangtze River?
Mm-hmm.
Very swift current. Going in and then come out. And to me, I couldn't imagine bodies floating in that river, you know. The police would come out and tie them to a buoy. They wouldn't take them out of the river, they'd just tie them to a buoy. Well, we were tied up against a cruiser, and an LST come down the river, our ships, and it was piloted by a, what are these guys, they put him on, pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And he misjudged the current and hit us so hard it knocked the detonators out of our depth charges. We had no power. We dropped our hook, our anchor, and that broke. Our halyards lines all broke. And we kept going up the river, just bang, bang.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up next to an English cruiser. They finally got some lines to us. And it was right at that time that they were going to have their grog. It's their drink that they had
Grog,
every
yeah.
day.
Okay.
Grog, is it?
Yeah.
So we were allowed to have it.
Okay.
You know, we could never have it on our ship, but
Yeah. And they had a rum ration, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how long we were tied up there. And that's the last I seen of that ship, with its back end up in the air. And I don't know, there was 3 sailors that got killed because they were below decks in the rear and the aft of the ship, and of course it squashed them.
Mm-hmm. But now you need a new ship.
Well, I had enough points to go home.
Okay. So when were you on the USS Butler?
Oh, that's the first time I went back.
Okay. I'm trying to get because we had you on the Vistula and then the City of Philadelphia.
Yeah, and then the Butler.
Okay.
The
So,
boat is the one that took us back to the United States.
okay. All right. And so you weren't crewing on that, you were just sailing on it?
Oh no, we were the guard. Gunner.
Okay, you're still
Gunner.
working.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So now how do they get you back home from Hong Kong?
It was a troop ship, but I don't know the name of it.
Okay. But this time you are just taking a ride. You're not serving as an
We
armed
weren't
guard.
working at all. Well, I always volunteered to work in the galley
Hmm.
because that's where the food was. You
Right.
know?
All right. So when do you get back to the States?
Early part of July '47.
Okay. And where do you land?
Treasure Island.
Okay, so back San Francisco Bay. Okay. Now, do they discharge you there, or do they send you back to Great Lakes?
They discharged me there.
Okay. And then you're on your own to get home?
Yeah.
Okay. And then once you got back home, what did you do?
You mean work-wise, or?
Work? Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Well, I had kind of a checkered career. I went to Davis Tech. You probably never heard of that.
I've heard of it.
And I took tool and die.
Hmm.
And then when I got out of service, I went back and finished that. Got my journeyman papers, but I didn't like being inside. So I went to work in the hardware. I like that, Riley's Hardware. And then after that, I peddled milk, which was a good job because, boy, you're nothing but brawn.
Hmm.
And then I bought a gas station. And the fellow that was in charge of, Sinclair was the name of the gas station. The fellow that was in charge of all the stations in that area said to me on Monday morning, I saved an empty tank for you yesterday and you weren't open. I said, I'm not open on Sunday. He said, well, next week you will be. I said, no, I'll sell it. He said, you can't afford to. No. I sold it. And went home and started painting the house. And my wife said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to paint the house. And then she saw an ad in the paper for Ferris Coffee and Nut Company. I don't know if you know that or not. And I went down there, and there were 3 owners, and took an aptitude test. And then I went home. I didn't hear from them, so I called them about 2 weeks and said, am I being considered? And they said, yes. But the last thing you said is you want to, I'd like to give it a whirl. And we don't want that. We want someone that'll stay. Well, I stayed for 34 years.
Okay.
And I owned it for 23. So that was my career.
All right. And they're still running business.
Oh, yeah.
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 They're still out there. All right. Now, think back to the time that you spent in the Navy. Are there other events or impressions or things that stay with you that you haven't brought into the story yet?
When we were in Galveston, Texas, I chummed around with a pair of twins. And in the bow of this tanker was where they kept some of the ammunition. And one of the twins was down in the bottom of the hole.
Mm-hmm.
And the other twin slipped on the ladder and fell on his brother, killed him. And I never got over that. I don't know what happened to them guys, you know. I know what happened to the guy who got killed,
Yeah.
but...
Just kind of an awful thing that just happened.
Right.
Unexpected or planned. Right. Anything else that kind of stands out for you?
Well, when I got on the Vistula, there wasn't a soul on there that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And we got leave, And one of the guys that was on our gunnery crew got in a fight and ended up in the hospital. And the guy that replaced him, I went to school with. So I was happy as a lark, you know. I had a friend.
So, yeah. And then did he stay with you then only on that ship, or did he?
No, on that ship.
Okay. All right. Now, when you think back to the time you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you, or what did you learn from it?
Well, I think every young man should go in service. I think it taught me discipline. And I didn't like it at the time, but I think it was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
I was glad to have served.
And do you see what kind of benefit you took out of that later? Things you could do better because you'd been in the Navy?
I forgot to tell you another instant. May I tell you that?
Yep.
We were the flagship for evacuating Japanese prisoners out of French Indochina.
Okay, yeah.
And we pulled in there, got tied up, and the French Indo, what were the people there? French Indos?
Well, you had the French themselves, because the French military is there, and then you have Vietnamese and...
Well, they thought we were the French coming back to occupy their land.
Okay, so that'd be the Vietnamese.
And they opened us on us.
Okay. Now, do you know if you were going into Haiphong, what's now the northern part of Vietnam?
Saigon.
Okay, going to Saigon, okay. But there were locals there who were shooting at you?
Yeah.
Okay. Because there was a...
We didn't know where it was coming from. All we knew is we had to get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And there too, we didn't have any steam up, so
Now, which ship were you on at the time?
that was the Damon M. Cummings, the
Okay.
DE.
All right. Okay, so that's the part. Now, did you eventually get into the harbor? I mean, you had to back off when they were shooting at you. Did you go back in later?
No,
Okay.
we didn't.
And
And one of the guys got real sick, and they wanted 5 armed guard guys to go on the whaleboat, you know what a
Mhm.
whaleboat is, and take this sailor out to the hospital ship, which was moored out in the sea a ways.
Mhm.
So we did that. You know, that was a hairy ride.
Mhm.
I don't know what river we were on, but there was people all along that weren't too happy with us being there.
because there were, I mean, the French Indochina was kind of a complicated place at that point, because the Japanese had taken over and arrested the French troops essentially. But then at the end of the war, there were areas where the Vietnamese themselves took over, and then the British came in and the Chinese came in, and
It was a mess.
the British were in the south. So you might have been on the Mekong or the Saigon River if you were down by Saigon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And it initially really wasn't clear who was in charge or what was going to happen next.
No.
Now, did you ever see any of the Japanese troops?
No.
Okay.
Not there. We saw them when we picked them up and took them up to Shanghai.
Okay. All right. What impression did you have of them?
Bunch of young guys scared to death. We didn't have any facilities for locking anybody up. We put them in the meat locker. You know, and it was cold. But that's the only thing we had a lock on, you know.
Okay. Well, I guess a destroyer is not really equipped to carry a lot of people.
No.
Didn't you have troop transports that you were with, or were you...
We went up to a transport and discharged them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long did you have them aboard your ship?
2 weeks, maybe.
Okay. It seems like kind of an odd thing to do.
Oh, it was odd because we weren't supposed to be the ship that carried any
Yeah.
Japanese.
Yeah.
We were there to protect the troop ship that was coming in.
Right.
That never got there.
Okay. So this was just kind of improvised then. It wasn't part of the original plan. It just happened.
It just happened.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
When we were tied up at the dock, one day before they start shooting at us, this one Vietnamese come down and sat just outside the ropes with a knife into his stomach. And I happened to be on duty out there. I didn't know what to do, you know. I thought he was going to kill himself. He just sat there and couldn't understand what he was trying to say or anything. So
Because the Japanese would commit suicide that way, but this was a Vietnamese person, as far as you
Yeah.
can tell. Yeah, and didn't finish the job.
no, he didn't.
He just.
Thank goodness.
Okay. Yeah. And so, now, did you go ashore in any of these places in Shanghai?
Did I what?
Did you go ashore in Saigon or Shanghai or?
We were ashore when they opened up on us. We were playing ball,
Okay.
and we had to go back to the ship in a hurry.
Did you go ashore in Shanghai?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you see there?
Just people, unbelievable people.
And did they seem to be poor, or was it like?
Not so much in Shanghai,
Okay.
and they didn't bother us.
Mhm.
We drew shore patrol duty, and we would go aboard with our SP when the guys were on leave, and no one ever bothered us. No one. We got in no trouble.
Okay. Did you see anything of the Chinese police or military there? Just the civilians. Okay. And at that time, it was quiet. You didn't have the communists shooting anybody or anything like that.
Not in Shanghai.
Yeah. Okay. That was still early enough before things
Yeah.
got dicier. Right. Okay. Yeah. So there were other things in there that were worth adding.
Yeah. It's amazing what things trigger your memory at times.
Because it was kind of an unusual situation, because this couple of million Japanese soldiers were still overseas when they surrendered. A lot of them were in China, they were in Indochina, Indonesia, and so forth, and something had to be done with them. And you also had to try to restore order after they left.
Yeah, we didn't know where they were going to put them or what they were going to do with them. I think there's still some over there, you know.
But basically, you were mostly just bringing them back home to Japan, and once they
Yeah.
were there, that was somebody else's problem. But still, someone had to do it, and the U.S. Navy did a lot of
Yep.
that transportation. All right. So it makes for an interesting story.
Really?
Oh yeah. And once you put all the pieces together, sure it does. So I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to share it today.
Well, you're more than welcome.